Hey everybody, what's going on? Jim Filoni here, and welcome back to the Jim Filoni vlog, coming to you from a very dreary, rainy day. But we needed some rain, so we haven't had too many April showers, so it's nice to have a little bit of rain, to help cool things off and whatnot. So I'm all for a little bit of rain. Um, it sucks that I'm gonna have to like walk in it, to get into work and everything. But you know, um, it's whatever. But today, I wanted to just kind of have a little conversation with you all about video games, video game industry, and in particular, I want to talk about Xbox and just how I went from being, an Xbox person to where I am today, where I don't have an Xbox anymore, and I want to talk about why that is, why I stopped engaging in the ecosystem, and why I hope the future is better for Xbox, and what they could do to bring me back as a customer. And so let me give you a little bit of background about my history with Xbox, and I'll kind of show you my perspective, and what I like about Xbox and what I don't like, what they've been doing, and all that other good stuff. So when the sixth generation consoles came out, I was able to get a GameCube, a Nintendo GameCube, and I absolutely love the GameCube. It's one of my favorite systems of all time. I think it's an incredibly underrated system. But at the time, I would say it was an incredibly underrated system. And nowadays, everyone wants it, and the prices for everything are sky high. So that sucks. But that's neither here or there. But anyway, loved my GameCube. I played Sonic Adventure 2 on there. Hours upon hours. My friend Soth, who I make videos with, who streams games, by the way, if you want to check out his channel, youtube.com /@Sothin7, capital S. I'll put a link down below, and I'll also put like the URL on the screen. But anyway, had a GameCube, absolutely loved it, poured hours upon hours into it. But one of my great loves, and still my greatest fiction love, is Star Wars. I absolutely love the franchise. It was a big part of my childhood. It got me through some of the darkest parts of my childhood. And, I made a lot of great friendships because of Star Wars. I think the only other thing that comes close is Halo, in terms of the impact it's had on my life. But anyway, I absolutely love Star Wars, and I was visiting my uncle, who, it wasn't my like biological uncle, but he was my dad's childhood best friend, and they stuck together through thick and thin, and we were staying at his house for a while after a breakup, and between my dad and his girlfriend at the time, and he had an original Xbox and a bunch of Star Wars games. Battlefront, of course, was amazing. Republic Commando, amazing. But there was also one game in particular that really caught my attention, and that was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. I had never really played an RPG before this. I played games that were, close, like Zelda, Wind Waker. I'd played that, and like Paper Mario, the Thousand Year Door, But, this was like the first real hardcore RPG that I ever experienced, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I didn't even get off Paragus, but I just found the whole world, interesting and whatnot. And so then I knew, then and there, I had to get my hands on an original Xbox. So I went to school one day, and I come home, and my dad had traded my GameCube in my pretty decent stack of games. And I came home to an Xbox, an original Xbox, Star Wars Battlefront, Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I didn't get KOTOR at that point, so I think it was Star Wars. No, it was just Star Wars Battlefront that I got. I'm pretty sure. But anyway, I was super excited, and then from there, of course, we went and rented games from Family Video, and, I rented Godzilla Destroy All Monsters, and a bunch of other games. And then I went and visited my aunt and uncle. I got games from my Xbox on there. And then I went to visit my grandparents after that, because this is around the summertime. And that's when I got the first Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic. And I was flabbergasted playing that game. It made me a fan of BioWare, and it made me a fan of RPGs. I can tell you, I probably have the only game that I've probably played more than Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic 1 and Knights of the Old Republic 2 is probably the Mass Effect series and the Halo series. And even then, I think I've probably played KOTOR more than Halo, honestly. To completion. So yeah, I absolutely loved Knights of the Old Republic and all that other good stuff on there. And through that, I branched out. I tried Halo. I absolutely loved Halo. And then Fable came out, and the original Fable, my friends. Work of art. Absolute work of art. Loved the original Fable. And, it was great. It was absolutely great. And I loved that console so much. And then, one year, my dad got me an Xbox 360 for Christmas. I think it was like year 2 of the 360, because Gears of War had just come out, so I'm pretty sure it was like year 2. Because if I remember correctly, Gears of War was not a launch title. I think it was year 2. I think it was the big holiday game for year 2. And I just became engrossed in the 360. And then 2007 came along. My God, I don't think there will ever be a year in gaming that was as good as 2007. You had Mass Effect. You had the Wii. You had Mario Galaxy. You had Call of Duty Modern Warfare. You had so many games. Assassin's Creed. But the big one for me was Halo 3. Oh my God, Halo 3 was an event, my friends. I don't think I've ever experienced more hype for a game outside of maybe Skyrim that was as massive and as culturally epic as Halo 3. I remember watching the G4 countdown to Halo 3. I remember watching every vidoc that came out, and I absolutely just loved Halo 3. It was the first game I ever pre-ordered. It was the first game that I pre-ordered the collector's edition for. I got the Legendary Edition. I was so excited for Halo 3. Let me tell you how excited I was for Halo 3. I did a report in school, like a presentation on Halo 3 for school, because we got to pick a presentation on whatever we wanted to talk about. So I talked about Halo 3, the different editions of it, how it was made and whatnot. Got an A. I was such a freaking nerd. But yeah, the 360, loved the 360 era. Had so many great games. It started to fall off there towards the end because Microsoft didn't know what the hell they were doing. The old guard had left, and Don Matrick and these other people came in that had no idea about gaming whatsoever. And then, of course, the big thing happened, the whole Xbox One debacle. So in case you aren't familiar or you don't remember, whatever, when the Xbox 360 was first announced in 2012, I think it was announced to be an always online console. You had to be connected to the internet. No used games. If you weren't connected to the internet, you could only play for 24 hours. Otherwise, it would brick. It had to be connected to the Kinect at all times, and there was fears that it was always like recording you and collecting your data and whatnot. And also, it was just aimed to be a streaming box, and a cable box, more so than a video game console. And this was mainly due to the fact that Xbox was looking at their data, and they determined that people don't want to play games on their Xbox, they want to watch TV. Well, the reason for that is towards the tail end of the Xbox 360 era, you guys weren't putting out very much at all. And also you had the Kinect, which drew in a lot of the Wii casual crowd, but much like the Wii, in its later years, those people that bought a Xbox 360 and Kinect, if they didn't sell it, ended up just using it for Netflix and streaming and whatnot. So, it was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, in many ways. And the Xbox 360, the Xbox One debacle was just so bad, and PlayStation just hopped on that opportunity. They trounced them, and it was not the generation Xbox wanted to lose, and they lost big time. Then Phil Spencer came and took over, and there for a while it looked like there was some hope. The backwards compatibility program was introduced. Game Pass was introduced, and things were starting to look up. But the problems didn't really start until 2020, and I think a lot of the problems that we are experiencing today, just as a society, stems from how the COVID-19 pandemic was handled, in terms of companies, stock markets, and all that. People were making so much money from people getting COVID checks that they don't have a realistic expectation, because investors, they invest in a company and they just want that number to go up every year. Well, when you have such a world-altering event that makes the money go way, way up, it's only going to be natural that it goes down, down, down. So instead of investing that money into, the company and whatnot, they, of course, gave all their money to the billionaire executives, and also just made these really bloated games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And it just kind of blew up in their face. And now we are experiencing the residuals of that. And now we have one of the primary factors of why things got so bad back in office. So, now things are just getting worse and worse by the day. But going back to the Microsoft side of things, I noticed trouble was brewing the moment we started talking about next gen, because Microsoft had been making all these acquisitions of different studios, but we never saw any fruits from that labor, and I always found that weird. They bought, Double Fine, they bought Ninja Theory, they bought the company that makes Wasteland, In Exile, is that it? In Exile? I don't remember their name. But anyway, they just bought, all these studios and all that, and we never really saw any fruits from that labor. And then they bought Bethesda, which at the time I thought Bethesda, was a good choice for a buyout. But on that same token, because Bethesda has always been closely associated with Xbox. I mean, Morrowind came out exclusively on the original Xbox when it came to consoles. Oblivion was exclusive to the 360 for a little while. Skyrim ran best on 360, and when it was, shown off at like conventions and whatnot, it was the 360 version that they were showing off to the crowd. And there's always just been a close, partnership there. And it made sense. It really did make sense. But then they went and bought Activision. And at the time, you were thinking about it, like, oh yeah, that's pretty freaking cool. Because you also got to remember, Game Pass, any game Microsoft puts out first party goes on Game Pass day one. So you're like, oh, okay, so I can do a Game Pass subscription and play Call of Duty when it comes out. Easy peasy. Okay. But here's the big problem. They're too big now. And I don't think they know what to do with that. And they're balancing so many things now. I think it's like starting to collapse around them. And, now we're at a point where they need to make so much money to keep the ship afloat. Because Microsoft, for some reason, doesn't want to... Microsoft only wants to invest in AI. They don't want to invest in anything else. So the Xbox team just kind of has to... Alright, we'll put Halo on PlayStation, because we got to make some kind of money. And, putting the exclusives on another system, I think is a bad idea. Now, of course, there are many proponents and many positives to releasing your games multi-platform. You get a bigger audience, you can potentially make more money, but here's the problem. You are trying to sell a box. Okay, you are trying to sell an Xbox or a PlayStation or whatever. You want to make sure your machine has an advantage or something to draw people towards your box. So, for example, right now the only thing that's really drawing people towards an Xbox is just being able to access Game Pass. But you don't even need an Xbox now to use Game Pass. You can just subscribe to it and stream games to your phone or your tablet, or you can access it on your ROG Ally or your Steam Deck. all these different machines now run some kind of Xbox infrastructure, which is great, if you are heavily invested in the Xbox ecosystem to a certain extent. Like, I'm pretty sure with the ROG Ally Xbox version, you can actually access your purchased Xbox games on there instead of just Game Pass, which is cool, and I think that's a great idea. I think that's what the Sony PlayStation Portal should have been. Should have just been a portable option PS5, instead of just like a streaming device. I feel like that was just a wasted opportunity, personally. But going back to the whole console thing, if you are putting out, let's say Halo Campaign Evolved. Okay, maybe not Halo Campaign Evolved, because it's a remake of an old game. We'll say Halo 7. They're putting out Halo 7, okay? You want to build excitement, right? You want to get people into your ecosystem, okay? How are you getting people into your ecosystem if you are just selling them Halo 7 on PlayStation? And this is someone who owns a PlayStation now. I've went fully PlayStation, but here's the thing. Xbox is wanting to sell a box. They're wanting to sell the Xbox Series S and X, and they're wanting to sell their new Xbox hybrid PC box here in a couple years, depending on if the market doesn't crash because of AI. And the thing of it is, yeah, it's cool to have a box that'll play my Xbox games and my Steam games and all that. But as someone who doesn't really play computer games, the Steam library thing doesn't really appeal that much to me. I'm still one of those fuddy-duddies that prefer gaming on console. It's just simpler. I can sit on my couch, have a controller. I don't have to worry about if my system's going to be able to run a game. I can just pop a disc in or download it off the Xbox or PlayStation Store or the Switch Store and know that it's going to work. Or, at least in theory, know that it's going to work. Depending on how competent the devs are. But as someone who, like I said, prefers console gaming, if I have the choice between, say, a $1,200 Xbox PC hybrid console or a $1,000 PlayStation console that has all the games that Xbox is putting out on it, plus the exclusive games that Sony has already said they're not going to be putting on PC anymore, well, obviously, the PlayStation 6 is going to sound more appealing to me because I'll have the PlayStation exclusives and I'll have the Xbox exclusives. Exclusives are very, very important, And I'm not even saying that as, like a gatekeeping thing, because I want everyone to be able to experience Halo. I really do. I really think that instead of Halo Campaign Evolved, I think PS5 should have gotten the Master Chief Collection. Because, it has cross-play capabilities. It would give people the opportunity to play all the original 3 Halo games on PlayStation, plus the 2 spin-offs, Halo 3 ODST and Reach. And, of course, they could experience Halo 4 if they want to. It just, you're taking the thing away that is supposed to draw people to your store. That's why we have competition in the first place. If Xbox has their games on everything, then there's no point in owning an Xbox. Unless they're just going to make their machines so cheap that it's, oh, I don't care about the PlayStation exclusives because I got this box so cheap. But they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. They got to do the profits, and all that. So yeah, that's kind of why I fell off of Xbox. It doesn't seem like Microsoft cares about Xbox, and if Microsoft doesn't care about Xbox, why should I care about Xbox? They're not putting out exclusive games anymore. So why would I want to stay in the Xbox ecosystem where, the games are also coming out on PlayStation, and PlayStation also has all their great exclusives too. So it makes more sense to me to have my cake and eat it too, just on the value proposition, then I might as well just get a PlayStation. Now there's been talks about Xbox wanting to bring back exclusives, or they're considering bringing back exclusives, and I hope that's the case, because exclusives make a console strong. Now, if they want to do the thing where, it releases exclusive, say Halo, let's go back to Halo 7. Halo 7 exclusive for, like 2 years, on Xbox, and then finally comes out on PlayStation. That's fine, I guess. So that way my PlayStation homies can experience it, but it's very troubling. It's very troubling, and I don't really know if there's a right answer anymore. But let me know what you think. Are you a former Xbox user like myself? What are your stories about Xbox? I'd love to hear them down below. What's your favorite Xbox game? And are you interested in that new console that's supposedly an Xbox PC hybrid? Let me know. Until next time, I'm Jim Filoni. I have a kind of a bonus vlog coming out tomorrow, so tune in for that. But I'll be back Monday with a new vlog. Take care.